Hi, this is Master Kambai. Welcome to this new replay commentary. Today we got a guest. You can now present yourself.
Hi, I'm mathbliz. I am a high intermediate, low expert player on Advanced Wars by Web. If we're to use like a league analogy, I'd be somewhere in like high diamond, maybe low challenger.
That's good. I see your card, man. That's a juicy card. 47 wins, 16 defeats. Man, who beat you down? Like top 10 or what?
It's so I was like 40 and like 5 for a while. And then what happened was like if you go ahead and click on my profile, you can see the graph and basically I was playing really really slowly and very methodically and very carefully, and I was getting wins even off of top 10. I think I won my first game against Bay, and I won against Rice Muncher and Fire and some others, and then I decided to just YOLO, queue up a bunch of games and just play them quickly, and then I had a losing streak for a while. Right now, I think against Bay, I am 1 win, 3, maybe 4 losses. Towards Red, I am 0-2, and then I have a couple losses against other players.
Well, that's still very impressive. I mean, you're one of the top players, even if people really don't know you well, you're out there.
I appreciate it. I think I still have a bit more work to do to prove that I am of the same skill level as everyone else. And there's lots of things I need to learn, but I think I'm getting there. Well, let's come back to this in like 2.5 months and see where I'm at.
Quick question. What inspired you with your quote? Let's
Oh,
give them the bad news.
yeah, I can't remember where this came from. Um, it's like I'd heard this phrase before, and then it came back to me again because of Critical Role. So like I do a lot of like stereotypical nerd shit, and I played D&D and I watched shows of it for a while. And for those of you who follow Critical Role, it's a D&D show run by a bunch of voice actors. There's a character in the very first campaign who has a gun that's called Bad News, and when I was watching, I just got inspired again and I remembered back to that phrase I heard about like giving people the bad news. And yeah, so when I was coming up with this quote, I was thinking kind of what my playstyle was, and at the time, I kind of had this like trappy vision control heavy game style. And I would lure people into traps, and then I would just like tell myself, "Ha, let's give them the bad news," and just demolish their army. That doesn't work at the highest levels. Like, Tortured will eat you alive if you do it. I can say that with firsthand experience.
So the other day we spoke about maps you would like to do, and I think Creepy Crawly was one of the maps. Am I right? It was one of the
Yeah,
maps.
yeah.
So I was wondering, like before we came in, I thought tier two was fine until I realized that was pretty low income actually. So low income, I realized max can be kind of broken. So after making the game, I realized how broken max would be. But so far, I never realized it. I just never noticed there was just no tier two. So this leads me to this question. For example, if it's tier 3, which are the seals that like work well in this map? And if it's tier 1, which seals are like the best?
So when we analyze the map, the first thing we have to think about is kind of like what the map dynamic is going to be, right? So I look at this map, and what I see is that it's very very open. It's really easy to have an army in one place and then shift it into another location on the map. So already we can discount any CO that wants to be targeting a specific area. This is going to be COs like Sturm. Well, Sturm is broken on this for different reason. He's banned, but Grit. Sammy is going to struggle. Sammy is, I think, ultimately fine at tier 4 for other reasons, but anyone that wants to like kind of do an artillery or stally kind of gameplay is going to have a bad time. And there's another thing that I've neglected to mention here, which is, and you've mentioned it, which is the funding. If everyone gets their quote unquote cities, the funding on this map is 18,000. Now, 18,000 is kind of a magic number for 3 base and 1 airport, because with 18,000, you can spam infantry, copter, tank, infantry. You can have infantry, mid tank, infantry, or you can do AA tank infantry. Actually, you can do that at lower, but it's really that first one, the infantry, copter, tank, infantry build, that's very, very important for the dynamic of the map. Because what you'll have is that if you have that magic number 18,000, and your opponent doesn't have that, they have like 16 or 17,000, then you can treat your B copters that you build as basically tanks that are really vulnerable to anti-air, but it's that 2 infantry that matters. It's that extra unit count. So if you can maintain 18,000 or more consistently, and your opponent cannot, and you can deny it to them in some way, you are eventually going to beat them by having more units, and especially more infantry that you can use as meat shields. And this is really what comes to play on this map. Early income denial really wins you the map. So you need COs that have the ability to either secure their own cities or deny the cities of your opponent, which is why, at least in tiers 1, 2, and 3, there are clear choices. There are COs that are just the only CO you can play at those tiers, or you're going to get blown off the map. So for tier 1, this is Von Bolt. Well, it would be Sturm if Sturm wasn't banned, but Sturm is banned, so it's Von Bolt.
So.
And
he can break the river and just jump the building, and if it's player 1, he can just get the base right away. It's ridiculous. I feel like Sturm should be banned from any league game. Even if he's considered 1, I don't consider him 1. Now, of course, someone can beat him, but I mean, he's still broken.
yeah, he's really rough. There are maps that Sturm isn't banned on that it's okay, but generally, when you look at a map to evaluate if Sturm is broken, you have to ask yourself, okay, if my opponent is playing Sturm on this map, do his infantry have any capture chains that they wouldn't normally? And if there's like 2 or 3 capture chains that they have crossing mountains and rivers that you wouldn't otherwise have as any other CO, Sturm is already going to be kind of broken, because that breaks the funding curve. Sturm can have tanks and like mid tanks earlier than he really should be, than he really should be able to, or that Sasha is supposed to be able to get before him. But Sturm, no like terrain penalty hacks, gets his first. The other thing you have to keep an eye out, and the real problem on this map, is recon reinforcements. So on this map, if you notice, each of the bases is kind of surrounded by forests. This significantly slows down tanks getting into the center. But of course, Sturm doesn't have that. And his tanks are one thing, but the big problem is the recons. On this map, Sturm recons move so fast that you can not only deny the opponent's comm tower, but you can also deny many of their cities. And then the accumulation of not having the comm tower, having to fight for it, and not being able to capture your cities quickly means that you just lose instantly. I don't think even Von Bolt can win against Sturm. And I know this because when this map came out, another really high-rated player, Risosphere, and I tested this out before our first game on this map. So in Tier 1, Sturm is banned, and that leaves Von Bolt as the only viable pick. Hawk really struggles to remove units off of cities, because even with the comm tower with that 20%, it's not a guaranteed kill of a of a Von Bolt unit on a city, right? Because Von Bolt has that extra 10 defense that doesn't scale with health, and it just makes it really, really difficult to knock Von Bolt units off of these key contested properties. So what you'll see in a game against Von Bolt when you're not vulnerable is that they will easily take control of like their two contested cities, whereas you will struggle to capture yours.
I laugh because I am currently against a Sasha player and I barely play Vumble because I just don't find him fun. I know how good he is, but I just don't have fun with him. And then I realized the lack of Vumble game on my channel, so I was like, okay, I will like pick up Vumble because I barely play him. And I'm against that Sasha player, and I know the guy is better than me, but I just destroy him apart because Von Bolt is just this good in this map because of extra defense and firepower. Sasha just cannot hold up. Like I'm about to get more economy than Sasha, and economy should be like her
Yeah.
strongest asset.
So a lot of people watch Deech's videos, and they are fantastic. You should absolutely like watch them because they are really good for teaching you basic information. But one of the things he said that I don't entirely agree with is that in his tier one video, he mentions that Sasha's kind of a stally CEO. This is not quite accurate. Sasha is a very early aggressive CO because if the game ever gets to a point where the funding has equalized out or the opponent has like a substantial army that can't be wiped out by Sasha, uh, she's just lost. So Sasha really needs to turn her extra 100 money per city into more cities and more units into a snowballing advantage that ends the game, which usually means winning the game fairly early, even if it doesn't look like that at the time.
I do agree
So,
with that a lot because Saturday I did a game with Advanced Warrior. He is a bit better than me, but sometimes I can still take wins out of him. But sometimes he does. Like it depends on the matchups, the seals, and about based on my experience with Sasha, most of the time it becomes a stalemate, and it's Sasha versus Og, and he wins because Sasha on stalemate is not really good. Like if she has like 2k more than Hawk, it's not very impressive because you'd rather get the 10% Hawk as in firepower than the 2k because 2k is just like 2 infantry and sometimes you will be able to have bigger stuff, but the stalemate deny that 2k if you know what I mean.
yeah, so Sasha is really difficult. The income alone isn't quite enough. It's really that income plus the fact that when Sasha uses her power, she's basically Bunbull. So she has to use those like first 12 to 14 turns where she has powers and the enemy is not supposed to, at least in this tier, to really like push the advantage and get such a huge funding advantage that the game's over. So Sasha is really, really bad against Javier because Javier can quite easily get his power during his turn. But this is how she's supposed to fight against Von Volt, against Sturm, against even Hawk. Hawk is really the main matchup that you have to watch, where Sasha technically has an advantage, but if she makes any mistake in power bar management and Hawk gets a single power, game's over, she's lost.
I think Sasha and Grid are like the lower part of tier one. I could also argue that in Fog of War, at some extent, Grid should also be tier two in more than a few maps. Now, of course, if you place Grid in competent ends, like I did a game against Count by, I've never seen
Yeah, I
a
saw that.
Grid player that good, but it's so rare that Grid at some extent could be considered too because they're like in the lower part and when we take a look like I speak about fog because in standard I have no idea. I know zoning out is very important, so maybe is much stronger. I really don't know, but based on what I know with grids, I defeated many grid player with eagle and that wasn't that hard. That was just like, okay, I send my recon, I find your artillery. Oh, cute tank, it goes away. You know what I mean?
Master Convey, I am so sorry. I think we're going to have to go ahead and do our Wednesday date. I have just been paged for an emergency at work, so I actually have to go back to the office. and fix
Okay,
this.
perfect. We will keep that as intro. Have a good thing. See you later, man.
Okay.
So we are back. Before you left, because of that emergency, I had that idea of a question. Do you think Cole is actually good in this map?
Let me think about that. No. And the reason for that is a little weird. Yes, in most of these contested cities, there are two roads that are next to them. But crucially, the square in front of the road, so like this square is not a road. So if the roads were bent so that challenging the city, like if every road went through these vertically instead of horizontally, then I would think that yeah, Cole's probably pretty good on this map. But because we are only likely to be able to get one hit off from a road, I think Cole is going to suffer.
Okay, that's good to know. That's funny because I feel like Cole is the CEO nobody wants to play because he just cannot be good.
I love playing Cole. He's probably my favorite tier 4 pick, just because I feel like people don't play him a lot. He's very tricky to use. And in general, in Fog, COs with just a movement bonus, and let's be real, Cole is basically Fancy Adder. Um, they struggle a lot because movement bonuses don't mean as much if you can't perfectly see your opponent. So in tier 4, Adder and Cole already have some disadvantages, and they become better when B copters and mechs are stronger on the map. And this is just not one of those maps. So I wouldn't recommend either Adder or Cole here. But before we get into CO selection, I know we started talking about it a bit before. Let's finish talking a bit about map dynamics. And basically, what we say by map dynamics is we're talking about what the game would look like if neither of us had a CO. No CO powers, just we just play without COs and we just see how it goes. So the first bit, which we have talked about, is the equilibrium funding, which is 18k a turn, and that already, once again, already has a certain dynamic where if you can maintain that or go above and knock your opponent below, you have the advantage of the infantry copter tank infantry build, which lets you get a unit advantage, which you can later turn into more concrete advantages on the map. But there's a couple more aspects that we need to talk about. The first thing is that the comp tower here is, well, not contestable, it is very much deniable. And this is going to factor into the tier 1 pick. Recons made on the weak side can deny recons made from this base in the top right corner can deny this comp tower down here for quite a long time, even if the other player is proactively building tanks to counteract those recons. And part of it is that the recon can make it here that fast. Part of it is that if we look at how the cities are distributed, you'll notice that the cities that this one base cover are all kind of in this section. So once these cities are captured, the best place they can go is just straight up, which coincidentally goes straight into the comm tower. So that's the first dynamic is the funding. The second dynamic is the way that these comm towers can be a little tricky to secure. The third thing I want to mention is that the HQs are a little exposed. Now they're not super exposed. It would be wrong to say that this map is definitely an HQ race and or a damage race. That's not quite true. The center here is a bit too open for any like HQ race from the start plan to work. But basically, what the exposed HQ means is that you always need to be careful. If you commit too much to the right side of the map, like as the bottom player, you can easily get HQ capped. Because
Yeah.
if you notice, the airport is 7 units away from the HQ, so a freshly made B copter can't even hit it. But at the same time, you can't just go for it because this central base is actually close enough that you can get two bases in an airport defending your HQ. So typically, an HQ capture is a threat you make to force your opponent to stay in the center or punish your opponent if they go too much on the flanks. Okay, so I mentioned this a bit before with the comm towers, but again, the left side of the corner-based infantry often push deep into your opponent's strong side, or they have that option. And so because of this, you actually exert an enormous amount of pressure on these four contested cities. So these two should go to Black Hole, and these two should go to Red Fire, just based off of reinforcement distances. But at the start, because of the way the infantry end up, these are easily deniable and easily actually capturable, which is what we're going to see inside this game. So the dynamic of this game is going to be your weak side is going to push out super fast because uh, they are going to be there anyways. And your strong side is going to take forever to get to the other side because they have a lot more area and cities to cover. And then eventually, as you get more tanks and you get more copters and vehicles out onto the field, that dynamic is going to slowly shift. And the one thing I want to mention here is if if funding is equal, if one side is not able to deny a city from the other side, then the infantry on infantry skirmishes early matter a lot. If you lose all of your infantry on your weak side early, your opponent can go for an HQ rush. All right, so that is the dynamic of the game. That's the dynamic. Oh, one more thing to mention. These black boats, you should never break the black boats. They're basically just a little bit of a vision, a vision like tool. And the reason why we never break the black boat is one, it gives power charge to your opponent. And two, we have to ask ourselves, well, what does our opponent actually, what do we lose by not breaking the black boat? And if we look, there's always going to be two forests out of either way out of this corner base. So killing the black boat does not make any paths to the center or to your HQ faster. And for these reasons, you should basically never touch the black boat.
That's funny because I've got two questions here. The
Hmm.
first one in the 900s because I'm like 900-ish depending on my alternate account. That's funny because we always blow up the other player boat. So you come out here and you tell me you don't want to break it. That's funny because now I will look another way this map. And now the second thing, don't you think it's very easy to just choke point the lab, basically leaving a unit there and just saying, nah, you need to pass by there to protect your HQ? Is it a viable strat? Because currently I am playing a game. Um, I have two unit parts here, and I hold that tall, and the guy cannot pass by there, and he needs to pass by here, and that slow him down. So breaking the boat, is it a good option if the other player is blocking that tile?
So what you're going to find is that if this square is blocked, again, like taking the alternate route does not make you get to your HQ any slower or faster. And oftentimes you're going to want to take the bottom route anyways to hide your unit from this black boat. So yes, you can choke point this off and it'll give you like these side cities, but one, it doesn't actually impede your opponent's ability to defend their HQ. It doesn't make it worse. That was what I'm trying to say. And two, if you have too many units on this flank side, then you are leaving your own HQ open. So what will happen here is that if you have too many units concentrated on this corner, I would group my units mid, shove deep up here, try to grab like these two cities and maybe even this city. And then if you go for an HQ rush, I'll loop back around. And then if I can manage to kill off your infantry, I'll instead veer right and hit your HQ. So blocking off this choke point doesn't give you any advantages besides the capture of this flank city. And we're going to talk about this flank city. These flank cities are very, very important, but most games are going to end before you get to them.
Yeah,
All right.
that's
So,
true. I know it by experience because I played a lot because I have like five. I have 7 accounts, and two of my account have 25 games, and the other five account have all 5 games. So I have like 80 plus games at once. So
Hmm.
I can tell I played this map a lot, and this map made me laugh each time.
All right. Let's talk about CO selection for each tier, and then we'll jump right into this gameplay review, and we'll talk a little bit about early game strategy. This map is a little. The meta has not been completely solved. This is not like Cliff Remix, but definitely the COs for at least the top 3 tiers are definitely fixed. There's no question about what should be played in each. And then tier 4, we have some flexibility. But there's also some key ideas that are basically you should do them every game or you put yourself at risk. So first, let's talk about CO selection. Again, we've established that early denial of any of these 6 contested cities can result in basically long-term strategic loss. You might not die immediately, but eventually your opponent's going to be able to spam out 2 infantry and 2 vehicles every turn, with one of the vehicles being a battlecopter, of course, and eventually just going to get overwhelmed. So you want an early game. You want a CO with a good day-to-day power that can help you take and control these cities. So in tier 1, that's Von Bolt. There is some argument that maybe Javier could be played, but again, because we've established that just shoving recons and tanks out of this base will deny this comp tower for a very long time. Javier is just not viable on this map. It's much to my chagrin. I love Javier. I've tried playing him a lot, but he's not playable on this map. In tier 2, Max is the way you want to go, and the reason why Max is very good is that his tanks can consistently 2 HKO enemy tanks off of the cities. And plus, you don't really make a lot of artillery. One artillery can actually be very useful for defending your HQ and/or slowing down the push. But in general, you don't make a lot of artillery on this map. Maybe you have like 1 or 2, but most of your fighting force is going to be tanks, battlecopters, and anti-air, the triangle. In tier 3, Kindle is the correct CO choice. The reason why Lash doesn't have as easy as a time is because one, there's not a lot of heavy terrain. There's a little bit of forest, but not a ton. And what heavy terrain there is all cities, which Kindle gets better bonuses on.
But
Also,
even the
Lash
forest,
has some.
the
Mhm.
forest as well. You don't have that many forests, but they still
Yeah.
give like 20% buff.
The bigger issue is that these forests aren't next to the contested cities. If this forest was like say right here adjacent, then I would see Lash having some options. Or if these forests were positioned in such a way that you could sneak an artillery onto them and then they could deny a city, that would also be really good. But the problem is this forest is properly positioned for it, but it's covering 2 cities you're already supposed to have, right? You want a forest like right here. And if there was like one like right here or like right here, then maybe Lash has some ideas to be more viable.
If I
But
would
here, there's just
keep going, I will complete with that after you're done.
but here, because of the lack of heavy terrain and the lack of forest placements that are good for the strategic objectives of the map, Lash is just not that great.
Okay, but yeah, if I would fix the map, because I think the map has too many planes, I think I would like add forest here, there, and like maybe here, or maybe there, because I feel like the map is very empty. But regardless, about Lash, I don't know if you're much more experienced than me, so you will know for sure. One moment. Let's do this. Yeah, about Lash. You're much more experienced than me, so your answer may be better. But what I mean by my question basically is, do you think Lash is like the best in general? She should be one of the best tier 3, because I feel like she is really good even if the map is not necessarily terrain heavy. She still is good because there are buildings in all maps, and her super can be really strong. uh, what how would you see Um, how do you see Lash? Do you think she is a good CEO in general, or she depends too much on the maps?
Um, I'm a little biased. Lash is my favorite CO. She's my favorite CO of like all of the COs. But I don't play her a lot, and the reason why is that Lash is very tricky to use, and most of the global league maps, at least in the current pool, aren't good for her, right? So Lash's powers are way more expensive than they should be. I mean, I guess you could argue that her Scop is fine, but her normal power is definitely super weak, especially compared to some of the other COs inside her tier, where Andy, Drake, Kindle all have ideas of using their CO powers earlier. So really with Lash, what you want is you want to play Lash if you can be assured that you get 2 HKOs on all the contested cities. This can happen if you have a comp tower in planes. And more importantly, that you have good spots to both put your tanks or good spots for your artillery to get power bonuses from either empty missile silo tiles or forests. And most of the maps inside the global league just don't support this kind of gameplay. And so I wouldn't play Lash. It's not that she's bad. I think objectively she's probably viable on most maps. It's just that Kindle is a lot easier to play, and getting the benefit that Lash gets over Kindle is very, very difficult. Whereas Urban Blight, it just happens.
Broken.
Yeah. So I think that as you improve, you'll be able to play Lash a lot more viably. But I think most of the people who are watching should just kind of stick to Kindle. It's just going to be easier for you. The same thing could be said about like Grit. Like Grit, if Grit is viable on a map, you probably still shouldn't play him because Grit is a very very difficult CO to get his full quality, the full advantage that he gets out of him in a fog map.
When I see a good grid player, I'm actually shocked because 95% of the grid players, at least in the 900s, are really trash. And usually in
Yeah.
the 900s, when I see a grid, I laugh. I'm like, free win.
The problem is that Grit players don't make enough direct units. Um, and I know that sounds weird, like Grit has like 80, 100 like direct units. Why would you ever build them? Why would you just build artillery? And the reason why is that like artillery are slow, and if most players when they see a Grit, they'll just spam recons everywhere, and that's good. That's very good to make recons because they move really fast, get a lot of vision, and they deal with artillery and all indirects very well. But because you know that's going to happen, you should build at least a couple tanks. When I play Grit, and I don't do it very frequently, but when I play Grit, I tend to build something like 1/3, no, maybe like 40% artillery, like 20% recons, and 40% tanks and anti-air. Like I make the same amount of tanks and anti-air as I make artillery. And yeah, they're weaker, and yeah, they get like wrecked by the opponent's tanks, but they're very good for one, blocking for your artillery, and two, for damaging recons and getting like finishing hits off on vehicles.
That's funny. Speaking about grids, I am currently fighting that weirdo. He spams stealth fighters as grids! And I laugh so hard because I know I dominate him. I have much more money than him. I know it for fact based on income and based on unit count. But I told him, man, stealth spamming as grid is not the strongest suit, man. It's terrible.
Grit, Sammy, Sturm, they're all very, very difficult to use, and you should probably not use them until you have a bit more experience with the game and a lot of the basic concepts come to you more easily. Like I'm like 1250 right now, like somewhere between 1250 and 1300, and I feel very uncomfortable playing any of those COs, even though like I understand how they're supposed to be played. I would not recommend them to any casual player.
That's funny because you are speaking about experience, but the way I see it, there are two things in games and in general. There's skills and experience, and they are two very different things. You can be very experienced at a game, but not being skilled at it and suck at the game because you just don't have the skills, but you still have the experience. So you're still better than any newcomer or new members of the community, you know. But the
True.
reverse can be told if a new player is just more skilled than you. Even if you are very experienced, he can still beat you.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. All right, let's jump into this game now. We've gone over most of the basic dynamics of the map, and through the capture phase, I'll kind of talk about what goes into my decisions, and we'll talk a bit about your decisions as well, and my thoughts about them. For creepy crawler, I basically have I have like the first like 7 to 8 moves like mapped out. So I have strong opinions on what the quote unquote correct opening is. There's some flexibility, and I'll talk about when we start getting there. But I firmly believe so. You know, the first couple of turns are fairly straightforward. You just go and you capture the nearby cities, and then all right. So here's the first thing. You don't want to send this infantry over to this city over here. And the reason why is that, again, so these two cities are supposed to be yours, and these two cities are supposed to be mine. If you delay too long in going for these, eventually I'm going to have my infantry that are going to be in this area anyways are going to be able to stop you from getting these two cities. And we're going to see that's going to happen inside this game. And a lot of that can be traced back to moving this very first infantry to the right for this city instead of immediately setting it down for a capture chain towards the center. So
That's
instead,
very good.
this
That's
yeah.
very
So
good to know because I never considered that. I always thought, let's go to the closest one. But based on what you said, I have been playing this map terribly for like the last 2 months.
So there are situations where you want to capture close by, and there are situations where you want to capture away. In general, the rule of thumb that I like to use is that if the number of turns it takes you to get to a city is the same, then you should go for the one that is closer to the contested front. So this city is 2 away for an infantry from this base, but so is this one. So you should go for this city before this city. And you can still do this here, but you're going to miss out on a potential option in your coming turn that I'm actually going to exercise because I moved my infantry here instead of here. Okay, so what is that option? I am actually going to skip this city in order to go for this city. Now, the reason for this is a little complicated. Um, this basically centers around the day 3 recon, which you should absolutely build on this map. Okay, so what you should keep in mind is that this infantry is going for this city, so I'm going to capture this city 1 turn earlier, and this city 1 turn. I'm sorry, I'm going to capture this city 1 turn later, and this city 1 turn earlier. So net, I'm going to be even on income as I was before, but there's going to be 1 turn where I'm going to have 1,000 less money than I would otherwise.
So
So I.
you're speaking
Mhm.
about the turn 3 recon. Is it just like Lift Remix? If you don't have it, you lose?
No, on this map, if you don't have to build the turn 3 recon. You
Okay.
don't lose the game if you don't have it. But this recon has a very important function. One, it goes to the middle to check to see if your opponent built the day 3 recon. And two, it's going to zoom over to this side. You remember what I was telling you about how infantry kind of collect in this area, and the best thing they can do once they're here is like attack these cities?
Yeah.
Building the day 3 recon, sending it center, and then moving it to your weak side gives you a vehicle to help blunt all of those infantry on this side so that you can more easily secure these two cities. So I believe that it is important to build the turn 3 recon for both information and for help corralling the enemy infantry, but it doesn't lose you the game if you don't build it. Now, that being said, if you don't build it, there is some very important uh, there's some very important things you need to check for. All right. So, there's one more interesting thing that I did here. So normally people would send an infantry out to the right to get to this city
Yeah.
next, but you want to send the second infantry this way for two reasons. One is that if you don't send the second infantry this way, the turn 3 recon from your opponent can actually stop the capture of the city. So you need to send the second infantry this direction to capture this. And then, if you successfully capture this, you can use this infantry to get a cheeky capture on one of these two cities, which is exactly what I'm going to do this game. So let's skip forward a couple turns so that we can see the path of the recon here. Everything else is fairly standard. You go and you capture cities close by to you when you should really be pushing to these cities that I'm going to ultimately contest. All right, so this is a important move. This is going to be correct as of today, May 2nd, 2022. But if this becomes meta, this recon move will no longer be correct. So this only works so long as people don't know it. So I guess I am ruining this one. Sorry, Convey. All right, so this recon moves to this central square. Remember that the destination for this recon is to come over to the weak side. It's going to be there to blunt the infantry. But the reason why we put this recon here is that it's very possible that there's just a wayward infantry somewhere in this general area. And if there is, if you were to move this infantry straight down, I could get a hit off on it and then really slow down the capture of these two buildings. Many games on this map are lost because one person sends out the day 3 recon, gets a hit off of an infantry here, and then their opponent is no longer ever able to capture either of these two cities. Now, I think you move your infantry in a way that dodges this. Yes. So you move your infantry correctly here, which means that I can't get a hit off. The other thing that's important to mention here is that tanks that come from this base will move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They can get to this square. And moving the recon here gives me vision. So I can see if, one, you didn't build the early recon, but you built a tank and then you sent it out here. Now, of course, once you know about this move, you just move your first tank to one square above and you're fine. So the problem with the square is that, one, once people know about it, they can hide their tank. And two, if both people do a turn 3 recon, then the second player has an issue. Player 1 can hit my recon, and more importantly, the recons block each other from being able to get to the to the side of the map that they actually want to be on.
That's funny.
All right,
Because
so
you're telling me it will be meta soon, but this video it will probably be uploaded like in June or July because I don't always right away upload stuff, so we are fine.
okay. One more thing I wanted to know about your move. You never want to build vehicles from this base early. You always want to build vehicles from this base because they're centralized, and then you can have them move to whichever side of the map they need to go to.
That's good to
If you,
know. I always build
yeah,
my tank at the end because I'm like, I want to protect my tower. Because I've seen a lot of players just trying to get that tower, and I laugh because I have my tank ready. But then, based on what you said, it's terrible opening.
it's not a bad open. The problem with building tanks here is that you don't have infantry going for these cities, which are really important. But the reason why this tank is not better than here is that if we look at it, you can actually get to the comm tower in the same amount of moves, right? This tank comes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then obviously can hit both of these. But a tank from here ends up here, and it's within 6 move distance of the comm tower. So if they park a recon on top of it, you're already in position to hit the recon there if you see it. And I actually have a game where this came into effect. They tried to do a sneaky capture of the comm tower, and I killed their infantry because I had a tank perfectly set up. So in the early game, always build vehicles from the center, build infantry on the sides, and sometimes you have to build vehicles on your weak side, but that happens as whenever it needs to happen. Okay, so other things are perfectly normal. I move my recon over here. I'm trying to keep. I wasn't paying careful attention. I should have known that your infantry couldn't have captured this yet. Oh no, it's possible. Yeah, yeah. So the reason this recon is here is because I think at this point your infantry is either finished capturing this city and is in here, or this infantry is like going to finish the capture this the city and will move into here the next turn. And so I want the recon here in order to know if this forest is clear or not. All right, so everything else is kind of normal. Uh, yeah, so everything is reasonable. And if you notice, I have timed my infantry movements here so that my tank is going to cover both infantry once I go for this capture. So even though you interrupt it, everything is captured. And because I know that, because I haven't seen any evidence that there is a tank anywhere here, because obviously it didn't show next to my black boat, I go for this hit on this infantry because I know that you can't have a tank that can reinforce, right? Let's say this tank had been built last turn. At best, it's right here. And then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're just short of being able to hit my recon. All right. Yeah. So what's going to get you here is that you keep building tanks on the flanks when they really need to be center. So yeah, you go for a deny. That's fine. That in itself is not necessarily bad, but if you want to go for this, you need to have your tanks in the center. If you have 3 tanks like right here backing up this recon, I wouldn't be able to go for a
Finish me. Yeah.
counter hit, which I go for here. So I kill the recon, damage your infantry, and start capping. And basically at this point, oh, I also go for the cheeky cap here because you don't have vision. And basically the plan here, and my general plan is I want to secure my cities and then have a force mid. I'm looking to deny this city from you, possibly permanently, because I have my tank streaming in and I have the extra infantry on my weak side in position around my HQ to contest these captures. So right now I am aiming for a central push because I know you have tanks along the sides. But in usually what you want to go for is if I suspected you had more tanks like in the center, I would pull back. I wouldn't even go for this like greedy cap. I would just kind of position all of my infantry around my HQ and then start going for my personal recommendation for a mid-game strategy, which is aiming to capture this city along the side. Now, in this game, I didn't need to go for something so... I didn't need to go for that specific plan because I know you don't have stuff in the middle because I think I've seen some tanks somewhere. Oh, no, I haven't seen tanks yet. I instead go for a central push. Okay, I don't know you have tanks yet, so I'm going for a push because you attacked me. I saw an attack, but I am planning on going over to the right if you come in here with more tanks. So you keep denying. This is very greedy. This is maybe not the thing that loses you the game, but this is way too aggressive. These infantry are very, very important. If you lose these infantry, I could very, very easily capture your HQ and then use all my units as meat shields. I think I start hitting. I have to finish capturing some properties, but I immediately start attacking them and keeping my infantry away out of sight and away from being hit. While I try to take trades. You don't want to have this fight. You never want to fight here unless you can capture a city or prevent like my comm tower. Okay, you get a triple clear. I actually make a mistake in this coming turn. I could have cleared all of these infantry, and if I cleared all of these infantry, it would have been game over. Actually, it's kind of game over at this point already because I've denied a lot of money off of you, and I'm gonna get all of these contested cities eventually, basically. Let's see, but there's something. Oh wait, I think a turn ago, you hit my black boat, and I think that actually factors into me being able to get my power.
Wow.
Huh? All right, you kill an infantry here, so I know you have a tank on this side of the map. I suspect you have a tank here. I think I've seen one tank here. But I know at this point that you've been sending tanks on the flank, so I know that I have an advantage inside the center. So I'm going to kill your infantry on the right side, get a hit off here, but then focus on maintaining central control and building this wall. Okay, let's see here. Honestly, I think at this point, no, you're only 3 down. You're not quite lost yet. So you continue. I see now more vehicles here, which means that I feel even safer about attacking the central part. And I think this is the turn, or it might be the turn after this that you lose the game. No, at this point the game's already over. At this point, with a 6-unit advantage with a 6-unit advantage, a income advantage, I already have enough to push this for the win. It's not guaranteed. Like I can still throw this game. I can always throw this game, but like leaving this many infantry and honestly your tanks open for first hits means that this is essentially over.
Yeah.
So I want to make one specific note here. You go for this removal of the tank, which is normally fine. But if you want to do this, it's very important that you get your own tank on top of this city. So you can do this if you can put another tank on here. But if you can't put a tank on here, basically what you're saying is, hey, I have these 2 tanks on low defense terrain, hit me. And yeah, the rest of the game is fairly straightforward. I make sure I clear out your infantry because that's all that matters. I hide my anti-air, and I continue pushing in the center to get a unit advantage. And at this point, you surprised me with the mid-tank. I wasn't expecting that, so I build my own in response. But your mid-tank isn't going to be able to do very much if all of your tanks are dead, which is kind of what happens here. I just clear out all of your units, and game's over.
I think I resign on my next turn.
Yeah, yours honest. I made a slight mistake. I was like calculating how to trap this tank, but I forgot that I meant to use my B-copter as one of the traps, and so I there was a way I could do this so that you wouldn't be able to get a proper hit off with the mid tank, but I messed it up. So you get like a nice hit off on my tank, but I think after I realized I'd messed up, I calculated that I could get power and get a first strike on the mid tank here. Otherwise, you might actually be okay. Yeah. So basically, what lost you this game was a mixture of a cap phase that was not ideal, and building your tanks on the flank instead of the center. So you lacked some flexibility in your army, and I used that to get temporary numerical advantages in different parts of the map and get a unit advantage. So yeah, so this game is useful for showing like, okay, what is an optimal cap side from the player 2 side. But I just wanted to spend a little bit of time here talking about like what.
I am ready to end this off. Sorry about that. My coworker just arrived.
You're good. All right, just a finishing note. The one thing I want to mention is in a normal game where like cities are traded with each other, the place that you want to make a push is you want to take your opponent's corner city with the minimal resources. If you can take it with like a recon and some infantry, then you will have succeeded basically. Because if you dedicate too many tanks to taking your opponent's city, they will just do an HQ push. So it's like this balance. You have central armies, and you're trying to capture these flank cities, and whoever gets their opponent's flank city wins the game based off of the 18k and infantry B-copter tank spam that they can do.
That's good knowledge. You look like someone that fully understands this map. You clearly understand it better than me, and this is interesting. That's the point of doing that kind of video. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, not particularly. If you have viewers that are on the Discord, come join the AWBW Discord. We talk a lot about these maps, and we talk about like opening theory and strategies. And a lot of my creepy crawler preparation came from a couple of games, and then talking with Kant Bay and Risosphere and other players about ideas for the map.
That's very good. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
Video. Thank you very much. So That being said, we will do more video like this if you want in the future.
Yeah, of
So
course.
I hope you guys enjoyed. Like, comment, and subscribe. We will see each other in future video and stream.